بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم أما بعد اللهم نور قلوبنا بنور هديك سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم تقبل منا وزدنا علما يا أرحم الراحمين ووفقنا لاتباع سنة نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم آمين ثم آمين. Alhamdulillah, tonight, last week we finished the introduction, and so tonight, alhamdulillah, we can actually get into the narrations themselves. But even in getting into the narrations, we'll, what can I say, but we'll still touch on some technical issues. And the reason that we'll touch on some technical issues is because as we work through the text, we're going to actually see more and more of these mustalah, yani the hadith nomenclature, and we're going to become familiar with it in an applied manner. And so this way we'll have a hands-on understanding of hadith and the hadith sciences, but also we can take lessons from the Arba'un, which is the bigger issue is not just the science of hadith itself, but the meanings, so that we can apply them in our lives. However, having said that, and the importance of the meanings and applying them in our lives, we also we want to walk away to where we have some kind of understanding. When I say that something comes from a jamia, what is it? If I say from Bukhari and Muslim, well, what does that mean? And so forth and so on. And so we want to arrive at not just an understanding of deen, but an understanding of the science, not just an understanding of the science, but an applicable way of understanding our deen in the world that we live in. So alhamdulillah, this is the aim of these classes, and we pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us tawfiq. And as I mentioned in my introduction, perhaps in the first introduction, that I had began with, is that going over this text, I broke it down into 10 chapters, and I believe that these 10 chapters, they serve as a way to understand these hadith and to put them together in a way that we can apply them, that we can go through them faster and apply them easier, inshallah. And if for lack of better terms, we can contextualize them, and so we can see them in a larger context, inshallah. So this first chapter, which we'll start today, chapter 1, I title it the general foundation, or the general foundations of the deen of Islam. Right? General foundations of the deen of Islam. And the first chapter consists of the first 8 hadith 1 through 8. Inshallah. So what we are going to do is I'll give you a little bit of I'll mention that. What is the title of the chapter? The chapter title is General Foundations of the Deen of Islam. It's hadith 1 through 8. And having said that, we'll give a different type of introduction and mention also that this chapter consists of 6 narrators. So there's 6 companions that are mentioned. And there's 2 compilers that are mentioned. The 2 compilers are Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim. All 8 of these hadith are from Bukhari and or Muslim. And then because they're all from Bukhari and Muslim, they come from one type of collection, one type of book, inshallah. And so this is what we're going to, one of the problems that we have here is, and I think I mentioned this last week, is that the dilemma of time, to where if we were to go over every single one of these people, then what would end up happening is we would run, we would spend more time talking about the companions and the compilers than the hadith themselves. And so we don't want to do that, but we want to leave, we want to talk about some things, so choosing what to mention and what not to mention, that's always going to be the problem, inshallah. But what we'll do is we'll read the hadith, and then after we read the hadith, we'll talk about the hadith nomenclature, we'll talk about the ranking of the collections. The issue that I have is that I kind of want to stall, because I want to give time for Mahmoud to come and his family, because I don't want them to miss the reading of the hadith. I'm not so much concerned about them missing the mustalih, because these are things that I want to benefit you with, but they're not as important as hearing the hadith themselves. So one of the things that we'll mention is, we'll just mention Imam Bukhari. Imam Bukhari, he died when he was 62 years old. He lived from the year 194 of the Hijrah to the year 256 of the Hijrah. He was blind as a young man, as a boy, and his mother used to make dua for him, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with his sight again. And he was known from a young boy to be someone with impeccable impeccable memory, forgive me. And he, alhamdulillah, Bukhara is in this area of Khorasan, I believe modern day Uzbekistan, if I remember correctly. And he, alhamdulillah, he was sitting with his teacher one day, and his teacher said to the audience, to the students, if only someone would come and write a book of only sound narrations, where there was nothing but sound narrations in it. And so Imam Bukhari took this upon himself. He made the intentions to do this, and he started with his Jamia, his, what we call today Sahih Bukhari. And so every narration that he included in this book, he would make dua, he would make salatul istikhara, and place it in the collection. And from his students is Imam Tirmidhi and Imam Muslim, and other than them, but these are probably the two most prominent students that we know. And Imam Muslim, he lived from around 206, even though there's this disagreement regarding this. Some people say he was born in 200, 201, 202, 204, but the strongest opinion, according to what has arrived, is 206, but there's doubt about it. And he died in the year 261, about 5 years after Imam Bukhari. And so understand that Bukhari is only 5 years, about 10 years older. And he's not even 10 years, he's what, just say 8 years older? I think 12 years older, around that. Just say 10 years older. 10 years older than Imam Muslim. But Imam Muslim looks up to him in such a way that he's seen as kind of a mentor. So that Imam Bukhari, and this is a lesson that we could take for our age, is Imam Bukhari was challenged by the people in his time. Not only was he challenged to see his level of knowledge, but he was even spoken ill against, to where they said his aqidah was off. They said he was a deviant. They called Imam Bukhari a deviant. And one of the people who did this was an imam named Imam Duhayli. And Imam Duhayli, he said that, Imam Bukhari knew that he had this problem, and he said to him, when he arrived in town, he said, I'll answer you, I'll meet with you, we can have this talk. He said, but I'm just coming from travel, if you can just give me time to rest first. And Imam Duhayli agreed to this, and then went on this kind of barrage, asking him questions, trying to trick him up. And when Imam Bukhari made any mistake, Duhayli used this to say, look, he doesn't know anything, he's a deviant, this and that. And Imam Duhayli was in a gathering where he started to say things about Imam Bukhari, call him a deviant, these things. Imam Muslim, he jumped up, he stood up, he was a student of Imam Duhayli. He stood up in the gathering and he said, you take all of your hadith back, take them all back. He said, take all of your hadith back, I don't want any of them, right? And this is something that's important, actually. I'll say this. How are you? I'll say this because it's something that we need to understand. A sheikh who gives, a teacher, I don't want to say a sheikh, because a teacher can be, it doesn't have to be a sheikh, it could be someone like me. The teacher, once you get a narration from your teacher, the teacher does not ever have the right to say to you, I didn't give that to you, right? So for example, Imam Malik, a student sat with Imam Malik and he said, do you give me ijazah? Do you give me ijazah? Imam Malik said, what have we been sitting here for? Right? Like, what do you think I've been reading these hadith for? And so in this way, Imam Malik, he said, basically he's saying, and this is what our teachers told us, that when you're sitting with a scholar and he's narrating hadith to you, that he doesn't have to say ajaztuka, because he's narrating the hadith for that purpose. So once you hear a narration from a scholar, you can say, I heard from this scholar. The same way, if you hear, of course today it's a little bit different, so if you hear something on YouTube, meaning you hear somebody say something in a lecture, you could say, I heard him say. It doesn't mean that you can narrate a hadith from him. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying you could say, I took this sanad from Sheikh so-and-so. No, you didn't take his sanad, right? But if you hear somebody in the video say, that Qul huwallahu ahad is worth 1/3 of the Quran, right? You can say, I heard him say this in a video, that Qul huwallahu ahad, Surah Al-Ikhlas, is worth 1/3 of the Quran, right? You could say, I heard it on his authority, he said this, right? It doesn't mean that you could say with his sanad or anything like that, but you can quote him. Why? Because you heard him. If you sit with the scholar in person and they're narrating hadith, and I'm specifically talking about hadith now, then the assumption is that you can say, I heard this narration from him, right? And so if he has a sanad, you heard it from him, who heard it from him, who heard it from him. The sheikh generally gives ijazah to the person who took an entire text from him. So when you finish the text, then the sheikh will give you ijazah in that. And once the sheikh does this, and once you hear something from the sheikh cannot turn around. This is the point that I want to make. The sheikh cannot turn around and say, he never heard that from me. Right? If the sheikh did this, he's lying. Right? And so the only way a sheikh has to punish a pupil is to not give him anything else, to tell him, get out of my gathering. That's the only way that a sheikh has to punish a pupil, is to tell them, you're dismissed, right? But the student has the power to punish a teacher, right? And this is something that we don't talk about very often, because it's something that is not common, alhamdulillah. But the student has the ability to say, I'm not narrating anything from him, period. And this is actually what Imam Muslim does to Imam Duhaili, is he says, take all of your hadith back. So you'll find in the Sahih of Muslim, he doesn't narrate. He was a student of Imam Duhaili. He took many narrations from him. But because of what he said about Imam Bukhari, accusing him of being a deviant, accusing his aqidah, then Imam Muslim said, take all of your hadith back. And he doesn't narrate anything from him. You won't find anything Imam Muslim on. You won't find it. Because he gave all of the hadith back. Everything he heard from him, he just take it back. And so this is a way that the student, quote unquote, punishes the teacher. And I'll explain to you circumstances. But you just don't narrate from them. It doesn't mean that you narrate it and you don't say who you got it from. It means that you just don't narrate anything that you heard from them, period. And there's the circumstances surrounding this is if the one teacher is attacking someone else baselessly. And this is the situation with Imam Muslim. Another situation is say your teacher has taught you these things, and then he himself becomes deviant, or he starts working with the government against Muslims or something like that. And you, alhamdulillah, you have a solid base in your knowledge, so you don't need his asanid. Then you could give him all of his asanid back, like this. These are examples. Like I said, it's rare and it's almost unheard of in our time, but this is what we find from Imam Muslim, and we find it because of his defense of his teacher, Imam Bukhari. And so, alhamdulillah, these are probably the two most famous narrators in our tradition, of course. And the reason being is because they produced two books that are considered the most sound of books. And what is the difference between, we'll talk about the strength of books, and then we'll get into reading, inshallah. So the strength of books, when we say that a collection or a narration is mutafiqun alay, agreed upon. Mujahid, I don't want you to answer, you should know this, inshallah. Who can tell me what mutafiqun alay means? I just translated agreed upon. So, Michelle, does anybody know what it means?
That all 6 books agree, like is mentioned in all the 6 books.
Alhamdulillah. Do you agree with that?
I was actually gonna say the Bukhari and Muslim only. So
No, that's correct. And it's actually when somebody reads agreed upon or mutafiqun alay, a lot of times that's what they think. They think all of the ulama agreed upon it, but it only means Bukhari and Muslim agree upon it. And they have a book collection. I forget the author, astaghfirullah, but it's been a while since I looked into it. Lu'lu wal Marjan, afwan. The pearls and coral. This is a book that it collects together all the hadith that are agreed upon. It's a small it's only 2 volumes, and alhamdulillah it has all of the books that are agreed upon, and these are considered the most sound narrations in period if it's muttafiqun alay. After that, then it's anything that's found in Bukhari, and then after Bukhari is Muslim. And the ulama, they differ which book is better. So some of the scholars, they believe that Sahih Muslim is better than Bukhari, right? And the reason that they believe this is because Imam Muslim, when he brings a narration, he brings the entire narration. So Imam Bukhari will bring part of a narration in this chapter, part of the narration in this chapter. He'll break it up. And sometimes he'll have it all together, sometimes he'll have part of it here, part of it there. Imam Muslim, when he brings the narration, even if he only needs one line to bring for his point, he'll bring the entire narration every time. And so the ulama, they've said that it's better because of this, and also because they feel as though the structure is better, inshallah, more sound. Though I think we mentioned the titles of Imam Muslim's works, he didn't have any titles. That all came later, being completed by Imam Al-Nawawi himself, rahimahullah. So, why is Bukhari considered stronger than Muslim? This is something that we should know. Why is it considered stronger than Muslim? The reason is because Bukhari, he set a condition upon the narrations that Imam Muslim, and Imam Muslim actually challenges not Imam Bukhari but Imam Bukhari's teacher. He challenges him in his introduction, and he said, who came up with this condition? This condition is something new. Nobody has agreed to this condition, so what is this condition? But this condition is what differentiates the two. So Imam Bukhari, and maybe I mentioned this last week, we teach so we forget what we've gone over. But Imam Bukhari said if 2 people were in the same city at the same time, that's not good enough. You have to have proof that they met. You have to know for a fact that one took from the other. You have to know for a fact there has to be evidence that they came together and spoke. If there's no proof that they were in the same place, like the same building at the same time, talking to one another, then we don't accept that it's sahih, right? Imam Muslim said no. If they both were in the same town at the same time, we just assume that they met.
what kind of proof would he accept? Like, do they have like some witness, or just like the word that I met?
A witness.
So there must be a witness.
There must be a witness.
So if like one say like I got this hadith in private, like with the sheikh, it won't be accepted.
Oh, if they met in private, if it's known that they met in private, like people will say, yeah, they went to, he had dinner at his house or something like that. As long as it's the point isn't that they took narration from one another. The point is, did they actually meet or not?
So they must know each other, not like met each other.
No. So for example, Imam Muslim, if 2 people was in Kufa in the year, just say 200, right? If the 2 people were in Kufa at that same year, and just say Rabi al-Awwal of that year, then okay, they were there the same month, the same year. He said he heard it from him. I accept it, right? Bukhari said no. Where did you see him at? Where did you meet him at? Did you meet him at the masjid? Were you in the same circles or not? He could have been on one side of Kufa, you was on the other side of Kufa. How did you take the hadith from him when you never met, you know. So Imam Bukhari wants more proof. It's not good enough that you were in the same city at the same time. When did you meet him? Where did you meet him? You know, where was that connection made? And so he added this condition that you had to have proof, witnesses or whatever the case might be. There could just be a story where, you know, we were walking along and we saw him at the masjid, you know, something like this. But there had to be proof that you met him. Otherwise, he didn't consider just being in the same place at the same time, meaning the same city at the same time, wasn't good enough for Bukhari. But it was accepted. It was normal to accept that from the other imams. And in fact, if a person is thabit, if a person is deemed trustworthy, and I say, for example, I say to you, because I mentioned some names and it's like, of course, you know, everybody knows I met them. But I say to you, I met Abdurrahman al-Khattani, who is, he's considered Musnad al-Ard. He's considered one of the most important Musnads, the collectors of Asanid in the earth, right? And I say to you, I met him in his house, right? There's no doubt I was in Morocco. There's no doubt I was in Nufez. Everybody, you know, this is kind of established, right? But how do I prove to you I was at his house? What's the evidence, right? What's the evidence I ever met Abdurrahman al-Khattani? Because there's thousands of people, I assume, that go to Fez every year and they never even heard of him. So what's my proof that I met him, right? Alhamdulillah, I had the honor of sitting in his house. That's who I took the shifa from, right? And so, alhamdulillah, we what's my proof? The only proof I have is I say I have witnesses. I have witnesses. I have a story to go with it, but I have witnesses that were there. And so those witnesses, they're the ones that say, no, I saw him, I was there with him, I know that he met him, right? So I can use this example for Imam Bukhari, right? Because there is witnesses. Now, on the other hand, there's people here that I've met in the U.S. And so I say to you, for example, as an example, I say to you, I met Sheikh Ninawi. Right? Now, honestly speaking, I never took anything from Sheikh Ninawi. Meaning, I never had I never sat in a class with him. But I have met him, right? And the only person who was actually a witness to that was his murids, who I don't know. I don't know any of them. And my Sheikh Khalil Majdalawi. And Sheikh Khalil Majdalawi, he's older. I don't even know if he remembers, right? I don't know. And so, who's the witness to say I ever met him? I can tell you, I met him. It was at a conference in D.C. Right? We were in D.C. at the same time. But that's what's the evidence? So what's the proof? And so that meeting would not. If I said to you I took a hadith from him, that would not be sufficient according to Imam Muslim.
So for Imam Bukhari, he wouldn't accept even a weak witnesses, right?
I'm sorry, it wouldn't suffice for Imam Bukhari. It would be good enough for Imam Muslim.
So for Imam Bukhari, it has to be a strong, like proof of evidence, but not like something like this story. He wouldn't accept it. I mean, like there must be a strong evidence that you have met, right?
There has to be evidence that you met this person, that you actually met them.
So, is it the same for all the chain of generation, or just like for?
No, it's the entire chain.
So the entire chain has to get approved for each person.
And it gets easier though. See, so it sounds like it's difficult. First and foremost, you have to understand, Imam Bukhari is part of the Salaf al-Salihin. And so the chain, we have the Thulatiyat of Imam Bukhari, where there's only 3 people between him and the Prophet. So it's really easy. What's the golden chain? What's known as the golden chain? There's actually a couple golden chains, but the golden chain, the golden sanad, right? Do you know what it is? Is Imam Malik from see, as soon as I said it, it went Allahu Akbar. No, it's the freed slave of Abdullah ibn Omar, and his name just escaped me. Allahu Akbar. It was there when I was asking the question, and as soon as I had to say it Nafi', Jazakallah khair. It's Imam Malik from Nafi' from Abdullah ibn Omar. That's the golden chain, right? And then some will say Shafi'i, add Shafi'i to Malik Nafi'a to Abdullah ibn
So is
Umar.
it the shortest you mean? The golden?
No,
Why is it the golden?
It's the golden chain because who are these people? It's golden because who are these people? But the point here is that it's gold not just because of the short, because there's short chains like this throughout. We have the Thulatiyat of Bukhari. This is actually found in the Thulatiyat of Bukhari. But the point that I want to make is that there's shorter chains than this.
Just because these are great scholars, right?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
because of the level of who
Okay.
these people were. But we have no doubt whatsoever that Imam Malik sat with Imam Nafi. Right? And we have no doubt whatsoever Nafi took from Abdullah because he was his freed slave, right? His Mawla. And so in this way, it gets easier when you go back because you know who was with who. You know who was the student of who traveled with who. You know this. And so because of that, it gets easier the further you go back. Recent times, it gets harder, right? But further back, it gets much easier.
One more question. Did Imam Bukhari document all the situation where the people met, or just like did he keep this for himself to write it down?
He, as far as I know, he kept it to himself.
Okay.
He left that to the biographers. The biographers wrote this. The biographers are the ones that will record that. And why is the Sahih Sitta? I'll talk about this in the future. But why is the Sahih Sitta the Sahih Sitta? What warrants them to be considered the canon of Islam? Right. The reason is because they're the book. This is the real reason. This is the only reason, right? They are the books that all of the biographies of the Asanid, all of the Rijal, all of them, their biographies are recorded, right? Other books we have partial biographies, or there's people we don't know. But these 6 books, we know every single person that's mentioned. We know all of them, and their biographies are recorded. That's why they are the Sahih Sitta. Right.
One more side question.
No problem.
When did Imam Bukhari and Imam Malik exist? The time?
Now we mentioned this just before you came, and I want to say to you, and I'm saying this, the only reason we went down this avenue is because I was stalling, because I didn't want you to miss any of the narrations, right? So, but these are the things that we were mentioning while we were stalling.
Right.
So Imam Bukhari, he lived from 194 to 256. Imam Malik, he was born in the year 92. Right? He was born in the year 92, and he lived, I believe, until 170. Around 170. I don't want to say 170, but he died around 80 years old. So in his 80s, you can look it up real quick, or Jahid. So he's got this. But
he was born 93 and he died 197.
197. So no. So alhamdulillah, it's no. No. So alhamdulillah, this is, and one of the things about Imam Malik, just a side note, is that all of the other muhaddithin traveled. He's the only one that didn't travel. He didn't. Not the only one, but he's the ilm came to him. He didn't go out for it. Mashallah, ajib. And it's funny because he's the one that quotes. He's the one that we have the quote from. That you go to knowledge, knowledge doesn't come to you. But he's the one that he came to. Allahu Akbar. Anyway, so it's agreed upon, mutafiqun alayh, then it's Bukhari, then it's Muslim, and then it's those that agree with their conditions, right? So if one has a mustadrak or a mustakhraj, and we'll talk about what these are, if you have one of these books that agree upon the conditions of Bukhari and Muslim, then that becomes strong after that. After Bukhari and Muslim and these conditions, then it goes directly to Abu Dawood, right? Abu Dawood is the 3rd most sound collection of hadith. After Abu Dawood is, there's an argument, I would say Nasa'i, right? But people will say Tirmidhi. And the book of Tirmidhi, and again, we'll talk about this in the future when we come across one of his narrations, is that it said whoever has Tirmidhi in their home, it's as though they have a prophet living in their house, mashallah. And so, alhamdulillah, even though it's not the strongest collection, it's a very beautiful work, alhamdulillah. And so, anyway, Abu Dawood, then Nasa'i, then Tirmidhi, then Ibn Majah. But I want to say about Ibn Majah is that when we say this, I personally, I'm saying this, I'm kind of rude about these things, but I'm saying it tongue in cheek, because I don't believe Ibn Majah. I don't believe it's the strongest, the sixth strongest. I believe the Muwatta comes before Ibn Majah. I don't believe that Ibn Majah should be in the Sahih Sittah. I believe the Muwatta should. And I'm not alone in that. My teachers, are also of that opinion, and this is a classical opinion as well. And so, also some of the scholars, they say Dar Qutni should have been in the Sahih Sittah instead of Ibn Majah. And so, according to the majority of scholars, Ibn Majah. Why? Because we know all of the Rijal, and then the Muwatta, and then Daraqutni, and then after Daraqutni, then you have Bayhaqi and Ibn Habban, and then after Bayhaqi and Ibn Habban, which are on the same level, then after them everyone else is equal, inshallah. Meaning that everybody else comes after them, inshallah.
I ask, why did they limit it to 6?
No, this is the thing, is that it's a matter of the Ilm al-Rijal and whose biographies were complete, like whose biographies were complete. In fact, one of the books that we studied as part of our curriculum in this field was Sharut al-A'imma al-Khams, right? And the conditions of the 5 Imams. And they didn't include Ibn Majah. They stopped with, Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, and Nasa'i, and that was it. And they didn't include anyone else because they didn't. The Shaykh didn't feel anyone else should have been included. But alhamdulillah, from what I was taught, the only reason that these 6 are part of the canon is because we know all of the people in every chain. Right, so if you wanted to say who is this guy, you can actually look him up in the books, inshallah. If we had more, I'm sure that it would have been the Sahih Tarat. Tarat is less. I'm sorry, Tisa. MashaAllah. Forgive me, I'm tired. Allahu Akbar. So there's 2 ways I can do this. I'll continue with the Mustalih, and then we'll read the Hadith, and we'll get into the Hadith towards the end, inshallah. But so what we want to talk about, one of the things that we mentioned is all of these books. So let me restate this. We're entering the Hadith tonight, and we're entering chapter 1 tonight. And chapter 1 has 2 compilers, Bukhari and Muslim. It has 6 narrators. 6 of the companions are mentioned. Umar radiallahu anhu, Abu Huraira, should be Aisha. I know Aisha, she narrates the 5th hadith. I believe it's the 5th hadith, and so forth and so on. So these 6 companions, but one type of compilation, and that's the Jawamiya, right? Or the Jamia, Jawamiya is both of these, inshallah. And so what we want to talk about is what are the different types of books. And so you have the Jamia or the Jawamiya, it's both of these, right? You have the Sunan, you have the Musnad, you have the Mu'ajjam, the Mustakhraj, the Mustadrak, the Juz or Ajza, yani the portions. And so, what are each of these types of books? These are the 7 main types of hadith books that you're going to find. Most, if not all, of the major books that you find of hadith are going to fall into these 7 types. So, what is a jamia? Does anybody know? So the Jamia is a book that it's a compilation that brings all of the subjects. And so in this you're going to find Iman, you're going to find Tahara, you're going to find Tafsir, you're going to find Sirah, the Fada'il of the companions, signs of the end of time, the raqa'iq, you're going to find all of the heart softness, you're going to find all of these in the Jamia. So the Jamia brings all of these topics together. And the three major Jawamia is Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi. Right? These three are Jamia. They're not limited to one field. They bring a whole. It's basically everything. It's universal. The Sunan. What's the difference between a Jamia and a Sunan? The Sunan is written. It might have a Kitab al-Imam, Iman. It might have other topics like here and there, but for the most part, the Sunan are written as fiqh texts. So some of them do start with Aqidah, but generally they go from Tahara to Salah to Zakat to fasting to the Hajj to Muamalat to family law to Jihad, and they follow this fiqh methodology, because that's generally what they were, is compilations for evidences, proofs and evidences. And so again, the remainder of the Sahih Sitta, Nasa'i, Abu Dawud, Nasa'i, and Ibn Majah, these three are Sunan, and they are Sunan, and so they're written, they're organized in this way. The Musnad. What's the most famous Musnad? It's easy. Musnad, the Musnad. No, Imam Ahmad. The Muwatta of Imam Malik is actually, we would say that this is closer to a Sunan. It's closer to a Sunan. Because it's organized in according to a fiqh text. In fact, it begins with the times of prayers and ends with the hudud, if I'm not mistaken. That's where it ends. And so, alhamdulillah, it's closer to a sunan. But the Musnad is a book that it's organized in alphabetical order. Let me not say that. That's not true. Forgive me. It can be organized in alphabetical order, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But the Musnad is according to the companion. So the whether you want to say the beginning or the end of the chain, it depends on how you look at it, right? So I would say the beginning of the chain after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So all of the narrations by Abu Bakr will be together. All of them by Anas ibn Malik will be together. All of them by Mu'adh ibn Jabal will be together. All of them by Abu Hurairah will be together. It's not compiled according to topic. It's compiled according to the companion. And so there's different ways that they would organize the Musnad. So some of them did do alphabetical order, but Imam Ahmad, the way that he did it is that first he did the Khulafa Rashidin, then he did there included the 10 promised paradise, then after them he did I believe Ahlul Bayt, and so he organized it according to, I guess you could say, status of the companions. But others, they would put for example Abu Bakr, and then Aisha, and so forth and so on. And so in this way, it's the Musnad is compiled, whether it's alphabetical order, whether it's according to land, whether it's according to the merit, the fada'il of the companions, however they choose, but it's according to who the companion was. And so again, you can't look up the bab of wudu. There's no bab of wudu. There will be a bab of Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anh. That's how the bab is. And so you look up that chapter and you're like, I know that this hadith is by Abdullah ibn Abbas, but you have to look through all of his hadith to find it. You don't know, you can't look up a topic, right? And so in my opinion, the Musnad is very difficult to weave through because of that. I mentioned Abdullah ibn Abbas for the reason that his book is rather big, and I know with narration, he is the one who narrated قال رسول صلى الله عليه وسلم رأيت ربي, right? And this is a sound narration, رأيت ربي, and it's found in the Musnad of Imam Ahmed in Bab Ibn Abbas. But try finding it. So you gotta read page by page. It's not easy, mashallah. And so, alhamdulillah. But then you have the Mu'ajam. And the Mu'ajam is the opposite of the Musnad. So the Mu'ajam is the narration of who you took from. So for example, Sheikh Muhammad Daniel, my teacher, he has taken from so many different scholars that he can say all of the narrations that I took from this scholar, all of the narrations that I took from this scholar, all of the narrations that I took from this scholar. So how the Musnad is compiled according to the Sahabi, the Mu'ajam is compiled according to the compiler's Shayukh, where he studied from, who he took from. And in fact, Sheikh Muhammad Daniel, he has a Mu'ajam, it's not a true Mu'ajam, but he'll name the country, and then he'll have the sheikhs that he took from in that country, and then, like this, and then the narrations that he took. But the Mu'ajam is based on the beginning of the sanad, or the end of the sanad, who that sheikh took from. Alhamdulillah. So, alhamdulillah, is that clear? Is that... And again, it can be according to alphabetical order. It could be like Sheikh Muhammad Daniel, he did it according to the land, and so forth and so on. So it's at the disposal of the compiler how he chooses to organize, who comes first and who comes second. Next is the Mustakhraj. And the Mustakhraj is an interesting book because it's a book where it's the same hadith that's found in another collection. So you could have the Mustakhraj of Nasa'i, and it's every hadith that's found in Nasa'i, but the chain is different, right? And so in this way, the Mustakhraj, it's the same narrations as is found in this book, but we bring a different chain for it. And so it's a beautiful thing because it shows you the different avenues that this narration has come to us. It didn't just come from this person, it's also from this person. And one of the beauties of this book is somebody will say, oh, that's a weak hadith. Okay, it's a weak hadith in his collection. But when you look in the Mustakhraj, there's a sound chain, right? And so in this way, it shows us a different avenue that brings support for those other narrations.
So the Mustakhraj shows the same hadith in different forms, or it has to be the same wording?
Usually it's going to be the same wording.
So the same wording, but the different
Sanad.
chains. Yeah,
No.
So would you repeat again the Mu'ajam? What was it again?
The Mu'ajam, okay, so the Musnad, Musnad, okay, you have,
the Musnad, yeah, but
so the Mu'ajam is the opposite. So for example, I took from Sheikh Hassan al-Qatani, I took from Sheikh Muhammad Daniel, just looking at those two. So I would have all of the narrations that I took from Sheikh Hassan al-Qatani. In one bab, it would be Bab Sheikh Hassan al-Qatani, and then I would have Bab Sheikh Muhammad Daniel, right? And so it's now who did I take from? Instead of looking at the beginning of the chain, I'm looking at the end of the chain, my end of the chain. And so, and then I would put, even though I have more esteem in hadith for Sheikh Muhammad Daniel, Sheikh Hassan al-Qatani is Ahlul Bayt, so I would put him first, and then, and that's how I would organize it. But so this is, it starts with who you took the chain from, not the end of the chain. So, for example, Imam Bukhari, he doesn't have a Mu'ajam, but Imam Bukhari, he traveled widely. He took from many different scholars, and so in this way, his Mu'ajam would be who he took from and everything he took from them. Bab so and so and all his narrations. Bab so and so and all his narrations, like this. Is that clear? Okay.
The Mu'ajam is like the person himself.
The compiler.
Is the compiler, or can it be someone else? Like can it be someone else like made a Mu'ajam for Bukhari, or there is nothing like that?
No. As far as I know, you could write a Mu'ajam, right, and say where did this hadith, who these people narrate this hadith and these people narrate, but it would be strange because where'd you get it from? Right? And so one of the things about the hadith sciences, especially writing books, is that today today people write whatever they want.
Right.
You know, but historically, if you didn't have a sanad, then you wouldn't. Yours, it would be rejected. You know, where did you get this from? And so, if you're not connected to them, it would just be rejected from you, inshallah. So, all of these books, technically speaking, are written by people who have connections back to those chains, inshallah. And what I would say is, and since I've mentioned his name several times, is Sheikh Muhammad Daniel. All of his books of, and I'm going to mention it in when I talk about juz, but all of his books of all of the books he's compiled has the full chain for every hadith, right? Because part of the issue is that today people just they'll do sunnah.com and grab hadith and then they'll just compile their own compilation and there's no connection back. And this isn't something that traditionally this would be rejected. It's accepted now, but traditionally this would be absolutely rejected, inshallah. Is that yes? So the mustadrak, it's not the opposite of the mustakhraj, but it's similar in that the mustadrak and the mustadrak are hadith that and Ibn Hibban's work, Hakim's work, they're mustadraks, right? And so what these books are, they are hadith that meet the same condition as so and so's book. It doesn't have to be Bukhari and Muslim. He could say the mustadrak of Nasa'i, and then he would bring narrations that meet the conditions of Nasa'i but are not found in Nasa'i. They all meet the same exact criteria as Nasa'i, but none of them are found in Nasa'i. And so, for example, you have Hakim, who brought the Mustadrak of Bukhari, I believe, and he claims every narration in this collection meets the standards of Bukhari. Now, later scholars say, no, this one doesn't, no, this one doesn't, no, this one doesn't. But the point is that his aim was to make it to where every hadith he brought met the qualifications or the conditions of Bukhari, but none of them were included by Bukhari.
So it's more like an amendment for the...
No, it's not that. It's saying that there's other hadith that you haven't heard of.
So appendix for the book by other person.
It's an independent work. I mean,
Okay.
I wouldn't call it. It's just saying that, you know, these other hadith meet that standard too. That's all. You know, and I don't like to say it's an appendix to work because these are independent works.
Right.
That are they're not connecting them to that. They're just saying that these hadith are here as well. Don't think that the only sound narrations are those, you know, like that, inshallah. And this is something that we've done as an ummah, is that we will say, is it in Bukhari? Is it in Muslim? And if not, then we're like, you know, I don't want anything to do with it. But it's funny because until one studies the science of hadith, if I said to you, this narration is found in Abu Dawood, right? Like, so what? You know, so what? What's that mean? But when you understand, like, after this class, you should understand that after Bukhari and Muslim, Abu Dawood is the most sound book. It's the most sound sunan, right? And so, you know, you should have an appreciation for the narration, even though it's not Bukhari and Muslim. We still have an appreciation for those. The reason that I am so lackadaisical, if you will, regarding Ibn Majah, alhamdulillah, I have to say, I listened to Ibn Majah from beginning to end. I have, you know, I heard the whole thing without any fault, without any missing. So, you know, I have it. But the thing is that what we know is that there's only about 600 hadith that are, I think there's around 600, if I remember correctly, only 600 hadith that are not found in the other collections that are not weak. Right? So it's a very small number of hadith that are unique to Ibn Majah that are sound. Right? All the other hadith that are found therein have all of the other hadith are found in the other collections. And if they're not found in the other collections, they're weak in and of themselves. So they're, you know, so it's not a strong book. Is that it doesn't bring a lot to the table. In fact, you know, again, if you look at Daraqutni, if you look at even Bayhaqi, they bring more sound narration than Ibn Majah does, you know, and so, but Ibn Majah made it in, they didn't, no, they
So I have a question, like when we say hadith is muttafaq alayh, it has to be from Bukhari and Muslim, right?
Yeah.
So for the Mustadrak, since it meets the same criteria from, like, say, Mustadrak Bukhari
No.
or Mustadrak Muslim, so if a hadith is brought from this Mustadrak, would it be considered from the muttafaq alayh?
No, it won't be mutafiqun alayh because the two imams didn't agree upon it. But remember, and this is what we said, right? This is the criteria. We said the criteria is mutafiqun alayh first. That's the highest, right? And then after that Bukhari, then after that Muslim, and then after that any narration that meets the criteria of Bukhari and Muslim, right? So the mustadrak would meet that criteria. So the mustadrak of Bukhari, if it's proven that it does meet the qualifications of Bukhari, this narration will be more sound or be considered more sound than Abu Dawood.
How do you usually like cite this? Because I don't know, I don't remember, like I have read a hadith that they mentioned it's mustadrak.
No,
So,
mashallah, it's found.
maybe
Mashallah. And not only is it first and foremost, usually it will tell you what book it's found in, right? And secondly, you would know, okay, for example, Hakim, this is Mustadrak, you know, and so you would know. But usually it'll have the title, and the title will tell you it's a Mustadrak of such and such text, inshallah. Now, is that clear?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else? So the last thing is the ajza, yani the juz, the portions. And the portions, the arba'un itself is a juz, right? So it's 40 hadith that are based on, you know, whatever. And, you know, you have collections of 40 hadith, or the hadith of Kufa, or the hadith of Sham, or the hadith of Misr. And so you might have, you know, 100 hadith, 100 famous hadith of Egypt, as an example. You know, this is a juz. You know, you would have a juz, like for example, I mentioned Sheikh Muhammad Daniel, and I do this not because I'm trying to promote my teacher, nor am I trying to drop names. I'm doing it because it's a good example. So he wrote 40 hadith of the Shama'il, and as far as I know, he's the first person to bring Arba'un of the Shama'il. No, and he's contemporary, but no scholar in 1400 years brought that. And he has this as a juz. So you have a juz on the Shama'il. The Shama'il itself, the Shama'il Tirmidhi, right? Shama'il Muhammadiyah by Imam Tirmidhi. This is a juz. Even though there's 500 hadith in it, it's still a juz, right? Because it's on a specific topic, you know. So a juz doesn't necessarily mean 40 hadith or a limited amount. It could be 1,000 hadith. For example, and I guess this is a bad example because it's closer to a sunnah, but a sunan. But Bulugh al-Maram, even though it's a fiqh text, it's delegated to only proof text for the Shafi'i school. I'm hard pressed. Do we consider it a sunan or do we consider it a juz? Because even though it follows the classical fiqh chapters, it's specifically for the Shafi'i school, you know. No, alhamdulillah. And this is again a good point with the sunan. Sunans don't have to be long. It doesn't have to be 7,000 narrations, 6,000 narrations. You have the Umdatul Ahkam, which is a book with approximately 500 hadith. And this hadith, this 500 hadith, this is a sunan. It's a sunan. It's actually a fiqh text. That's what it is. And so, alhamdulillah, the juz can be large, it can be small. Sheikh Muhammad Daniel, one of the things that we took from him is that it's the books, it's 40 narrations narrated by Abu Hurairah. All 40 hadith are found in the whole Sahih Sittah. So each narration is found in all 6 books, right? And so this is something, and he wants to do it with other companions as well, but all of them don't have 40. It's actually something very rare to have 40 narrations in all 6 books, right? And so alhamdulillah, this is a juz. It's a special topic, you know. Imam Bukhari wrote a juz. What was his juz on? Does anybody know? Adab al-Mufrad may be a juz. I would consider it a juz, but not that. That's not the one I'm looking for. He actually wrote a small book on wudu, right? A book on wudu, a juz on wudu, the hadith regarding wudu. And so anyway, this is the 7 types of books that you will encounter. For the most part, I mean, you might find other types, but these are the 7 types that you will most. The Jawami or Jamia, the Sunan, the Musnad, the Mu'ajam, the Mustakhraj, the Mustadrak, and the Juz. Alright? And so when you run across them, you know, okay, what's the difference? What's a Jamia and what's a Sunan? Why is this called Sunan Abu Dawood? Why is this called Jamia Bukhari? Right? Why is that? This is why. Because they're going to be according to what you find inside of the book, inshallah. Is that clear? Alright. All 8 of these hadith that we're about to read, inshallah, I hope. So we're going to read the hadith, and then after we read the hadith, then we'll call it a night and we'll enter into discussing them next week, inshallah. But all 8 of these hadith, they all come from the Jawami, and they all come from the Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, inshallah. So I have a problem. You have the English PDF. You have the English PDF too, but you can read the English, inshallah. Jade, inshallah. So I guess we'll go hadith by hadith. You can read the Arabic, inshallah, and then you can read the English, and then again next week. So we'll take the whole chapter now, and then next week we'll go hadith by hadith. Bismillah.
إلى ما هاجر إليه. رواه إمام المحدثين أبو عبد الله محمد بن إسماعيل ابن إبراهيم ابن المغيرة ابن بردزبة البخاري الجعفي. بردزبة البخاري الجعفي.
Okay, I have 2 translations, so I'm gonna just use one of them anyway.
That's fine. And I just Bardizba is it means farmer. Just it's in the old language before they became Arabs, it meant farmer.
أبو الحسين مسلم بن الحجاج بن مسلم القشيري النيسابوري رضي الله عنهما في صحيحيهما اللذين هما أصح الكتب المصنفة.
So I have the hadith without the citation. So I will read the translation only for the hadith.
Yeah, just read the translation, inshallah.
So it's narrated on the authority of Amir al-Mu'mineen Abu Hafs Umar ibn al-Khattab, who said, I heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam say, actions are judged by motives, niyyah. So each man will have what he intended. Thus, he whose migration or hijrah was to Allah and His Messenger, his migration is to Allah and His Messenger. But whose migration was for some worldly thing he might gain, or for a wife he might marry, his migration is to what for which he migrated.
الحديث الثاني عن عمر رضي الله عنه أيضا قال بينما نحن جلوس عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ذات يوم اطلع علينا رجل شديد بياض الثياب شديد سواد الشعر لا يرى عليه أثر السفر ولا يعرفه منا أحد حتى جلس إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فأسند ركبتيه إلى ركبتيه ووضع كفيه على فخذيه وقال يا محمد أخبرني عن الإسلام. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الإسلام أن تشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمد رسول الله وتقيم الصلاة وتؤتي الزكاة وتصوم رمضان وتحج البيت إن استطعت إليه سبيلا. قال صدقت فعجبنا إليه يسأله ويصدقه. قال فأخبرني عن الإيمان. قال أن تؤمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر وتؤمن بالقدر خيره وشره. قال صدقت. قال فأخبرني عن الإحسان. قال أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. قال فأخبرني عن الساعة. قال ما المسؤول عنها بأعلم من السائل. قال فأخبرني عن أماراتها. قال أن تلد الأمة ربتها وأن ترى الحفاة العراة العالة رعاء الشاء يتطاولون في البنيان. ثم انطلق فلبثنا مليا ثم قال يا عمر أتدري من السائل؟ قلت الله ورسوله أعلم. قال فإنه جبريل أتاكم يعلمكم دينكم. رواه مسلم.
Also on the authority of Umar radiallahu anhu said, while we were one day sitting with the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there appeared before us a man dressed in extremely white clothes and with very black hair. No traces of journeying were visible in him, and none of us knew him. He sat down close by the Prophet ﷺ and placed his palms over the thighs and said, O Muhammad, inform me about Islam. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ replied, Islam is that you should testify that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger ﷺ. That you should perform salah, ritual prayer, pay the zakah, fast during Ramadan, and perform hajj, pilgrimage, to the house or the Kaaba at Mecca, if you can find a way to it, or find the means for making the journey to it. He said, you have spoken the truth. We were astonished at his thus questioning him sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then telling him that he was right. But he went on to say, inform me about Iman, faith. He, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, answered, it is that you believe in Allah and His angels and His books and His messengers, and in the last day, and in the fate, qadar, both in its good and its evil aspects. He said, you have spoken the truth. Then he, the man, said, inform me about ihsan. He, the Prophet ﷺ, answered, it is that you should serve Allah as though you could see Him, for though you cannot see Him, yet He sees you. He said, inform me about the hour. He, Prophet ﷺ, said, about that, the one question knows no more than the questioner. So he said, well, inform me about its signs. He said, they are that the slave girl will give birth to her mistress, and that you will see the barefooted ones, the naked, the destitute, the herdsmen of the sheep, competing with each other in raising lofty buildings. Thereupon the man went off. I waited a while, and then he, the Prophet ﷺ, said, O Omar, do you know who was the questioner was? I replied, Allah and His Messenger knows better. He said, that was Jibreel. He came to teach you your religion. Muslim.
الحديث الثالث عن أبي عبد الرحمن عبد الله بن عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنهما قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول بني الإسلام على خمس شهادة أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمد رسول الله وإقام الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة وحج البيت وصوم رمضان. رواه البخاري ومسلم.
So on the authority of Abdullah, the son of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, said, I heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, Islam has been built on 5 pillars, testifying that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah, and that Muhammad is the Messenger of Allah, establishing the salah, the prayer, paying the zakah, obligatory charity, making the hajj, pilgrimage, to the house, and fasting in Ramadan. By Bukhari and Muslim.
الحديث الرابع عن أبي عبد الرحمن عبد الله بن مسعود رضي الله عنه قال حدثنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم هو الصادق المصدوق إن أحدكم يجمع خلقه في بطن أمه 40 يوما نطفة ثم يكون علقة ثم يكون علقة مثل ذلك ثم يكون مضغة مثل ذلك ثم يرسل إليه الملك فينفخ فيه الروح ويؤمر ب4 كلمات بكتب رزقه وأجله وعمله وشقي أم سعيد. فوالله الذي لا إله غيره إن أحدكم ليعمل بعمل أهل الجنة حتى ما يكون بينه وبينها إلا ذراع فيسبق عليه الكتاب فيعمل بعمل أهل النار فيدخلها وإن أحدكم ليعمل بعمل أهل النار حتى ما يكون بينه وبينها إلا ذراع فيسبق عليه الكتاب فيعمل بعمل أهل الجنة فيدخلها. رواه البخاري ومسلم.
So on the authority of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu said, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and he is the truthful, the believed, narrated to us, verily the creation of each one of you is brought together in his mother's womb for 40 days, in the form of nutfa, a drop. Then he becomes an alaqa, a clot of blood, for a light period. then a mudghah, morsel of flesh, for a light period. Then there is sent to him the angel who blows his soul into him, and who is commanded with four matters: to write down his rizq, sustenance, his lifespan, his actions, and whether he will be happy or unhappy. In other words, whether or not he will enter paradise. By the one other than one there is no deity. Verily, one of you performs the actions of the people of paradise until there is but an arm length between him and it, and that which he has been written overtakes him, and so he acts with the actions of the people of the hellfire, and thus enters it. And verily, one of you performs the actions of the people of the hellfire until there is but an arm length between him and it, and that which has been written overtakes him, and so he acts with the actions of the people of the paradise, and thus he enters it. Bukhari and Muslim.
الحديث الخامس عن أم المؤمنين أم عبد الله عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت: قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم: من أحدث في أمرنا هذا ما ليس منه فهو رد. رواه البخاري ومسلم. وفي رواية لمسلم: من عمل عملا ليس عليه أمرنا فهو رد.
On the authority of the faithful Aisha radiallahu anha, who said, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, he who innovates something in this matter of ours, in other words Islam, that is not of it, will have it rejected by Allah. By Bukhari and Muslim. In other version, in Muslim it reads, he who does an act which we have not commanded will have it rejected by Allah.
الحديث السادس عن أبي عبد الله النعمان بن بشير رضي الله عنهما قال: سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول: إن الحلال بين وإن الحرام بين وبينهما أمور مشتبهات لا يعلمهن كثير من الناس، فمن اتقى الشبهات فقد استبرأ لدينه وعرضه، ومن وقع في الشبهات وقع في الحرام، كالراعي يرعى حول الحمى يوشك أن يرتع فيه. ألا وإن لكل ملك حمى، ألا وإن حمى الله محارمه، ألا وإن في الجسد مضغة إذا صلحت صلح الجسد كله، وإذا فسدت فسد الجسد كله، ألا وهي القلب. رواه البخاري ومسلم.
On the authority of Al-Nu'man ibn Bashir radiallahu anhu said, I heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam say, that which is lawful is clear, and that which is unlawful is clear, and between the two of them are doubtful matters, about which many people do not know. Thus, he who avoids doubtful matters clears himself in regard to his religion and his honor. But he who falls into doubtful matters eventually falls into that which is unlawful, like the shepherd who pastures around a sanctuary, all but grazing therein. Truly, every king has a sanctuary, and truly Allah's sanctuary is his prohibitions. Truly, in the body there is a morsel of flesh, which, if it be whole, all the body is whole, and which, if it is diseased, all of the body is diseased. Truly, it is the heart. Bukhari and Muslim.
الحديث السابع عن أبي رقية تميم بن أوس الداري رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم.
This is the companion that we mentioned last week, and I couldn't remember his name, Tamim al-Dawri. This is the one that the Prophet ﷺ narrated. This is the one that met the Dajjal, inshallah.
Oh.
We couldn't remember it last week. This is the companion. No.
عن أبي رقية تميم بن أوس الداري رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: الدين النصيحة. قلنا لمن؟ قال: لله ولكتابه ولرسوله ولأئمة المسلمين وعامتهم. رواه مسلم.
Mahmoud, would it be easier if I read it?
Yeah, that's fine. I can do it. It's fine.
Okay.
It's okay. I can. On the authority of Tamim ibn Aws al-Dari radiallahu anhu, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, the deen, the religion, is nasiha, advice or sincerity. That's how it's translated.
Yeah.
We said, to whom? He sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, to Allah, His book, His messenger, and to the leaders of the Muslims and their common folks. By Muslim.
الحديث الثامن عن ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: أمرت أن أقاتل الناس حتى يشهدوا أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمد رسول الله ويقيموا الصلاة ويؤتوا الزكاة فإذا فعلوا ذلك عصموا مني دماءهم وأموالهم إلا بحق الإسلام وحسابهم على الله تعالى. رواه البخاري ومسلم.
Authority of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anh, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, I have been ordered to fight against the people until they testify that there is none worthy of worship except Allah, and that Muhammad is the Messenger of Allah, and until they establish the Salah and pay the Zakat, and if they do that, then they will have gained protection from me for their lives and property, unless they commit acts that are punishable in Islam, and their reckoning will be with Allah. By Bukhari and Muslim.
Bismillah. So this is the first chapter, according to, or the first section, if you want to say that, inshallah, according to the division of 10 sections that I've broken it up to. And again, what we said is that this is the general foundations of Islam, of the deen of Islam. And in this way, we establish through these 8 narrations our beliefs. What is Islam? What are the parameters of Islam? Who are the Muslims? What are the rights, or what does it mean to be a Muslim? So all of that. What is it that we believe? What is Islam? What is the parameters of Islam? Who are the Muslims? All of that is found in these 8 narrations, and these 8 narrations are enough for us to understand what is Islam. If we was to say, well, what is this deen of ours? These 8 narrations suffice for us, inshallah. They really do, inshallah. And so, alhamdulillah, we've broken this down into this section, and we'll take a look at each narration one by one over the next 2 weeks, inshallah. I think we should be able to cover all 8 of them in the course of 2 classes, inshallah. It's my hope, inshallah. Are there any questions before we close? Anything? No. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ولا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.